Something moved behind the attic window. I saw it before I even turned off the engine, just for a second. A dark shape stepped away from the glass. I stared at the house. The upstairs window became still again. There was no movement, no lights, nothing. I told myself it had been a reflection, but deep down, I already knew something was waiting inside. Tonight's story is a fictional psychological horror tale about returning to a place that should have been left behind forever. Sometimes, home isn't where your memories live. Sometimes, it's where someone else's never left. This is Tales of the Dark. My name is Daniel. I grew up in a small farming community nearly 3 hours from the nearest city. The kind of place where everyone knew each other. Where the roads were nothing but cracked asphalt and gravel. Where old barns stood longer than the people who built them. Our farmhouse sat at the very end of Willow Creek Road. Beyond it, there was nothing, just miles of cornfields, an old forest, and silence. I hadn't been back in 17 years, not since my father's funeral. My mother sold the property 6 months after he died. She couldn't bear to look at the place anymore. Neither could I. Life moved on. College, work, marriage, divorce. The house slowly became nothing more than a memory I avoided. Then, 3 weeks ago, I received a letter. The county informed me that the old farmhouse had finally been purchased. The land would be cleared, the house demolished. Construction would begin next month. If I wanted to collect any personal belongings, I had 1 weekend. That was why I drove back, not because I wanted to, because I felt like I owed the place one final goodbye. The drive felt strangely familiar. Every turn, every bridge, every abandoned gas station. Nothing had changed. Even the old wooden church still stood beside the highway. Its white paint now faded almost completely grey. The weather matched my mood perfectly. Late October, cold, grey clouds covered the sky. A steady wind carried dry leaves across the empty road. No rain. Just that uncomfortable silence that only exists in the countryside. When I finally turned onto Willow Creek Road, my stomach tightened. The gravel crunched beneath my tires exactly as I remembered. Half a mile later, the farmhouse appeared, older, smaller, more tired. The porch leaned slightly to one side. Several windows were broken. The barn roof had partially collapsed. Tall weeds swallowed what used to be my mother's flower garden. I parked beside the rusted water pump. That's when I saw it. The attic window. Someone moved, only for a second. A shadow stepping away from the glass. I immediately got out of the truck. Hello. Only the wind answered. I grabbed my flashlight, even though it was still daylight. Old habits. The front porch creaked beneath every step. The house key still fit. The lock resisted at first, then slowly turned. The front door opened with the same long groan I remembered hearing as a kid. The smell hit me immediately. Dust, old wood, mold. It smelled exactly like childhood. I stood there quietly, listening. Nothing, no footsteps, no voices. Only the wind pushing gently against loose window frames. I walked inside. The living room remained almost untouched. The fireplace, the old bookshelf, even the faded couch still sat where my father had always kept it. A thick layer of dust covered everything, except the hallway floor. I crouched down. Fresh mud, boot prints. Someone had walked through the house recently. The prints were still damp. I looked toward the front door. Mine were the only footprints leading inside. These were already here. Someone else had entered before me. Recently, I slowly stood. Is someone here? Silence. The prints continued toward the kitchen. I followed them. Every cabinet stood open. Nothing valuable remained. Whoever had been inside had searched everything or lived here. I reached for my phone. 1 bar of signal. I called the county sheriff's office. The line rang once, then disconnected. I tried again. No service. Of course, nothing ever worked out here. I continued exploring. The dining room, the laundry room, the back porch. Everything felt abandoned. Yet, every few minutes, I noticed another fresh footprint, always only one. Never a full trail, as if someone had carefully stepped only where I wasn't looking. Eventually, I reached the staircase. I stared upward. The second floor remained hidden in darkness, even during the day. The hallway upstairs never received much sunlight when I was 8 years old. I used to run up those stairs 2 at a time. Now, I hesitated. Every instinct told me someone was watching. I climbed anyway. Each wooden step groaned beneath my weight. The upstairs hallway looked frozen in time. My bedroom sat on the left. My parents' room on the right, the attic ladder at the very end. I walked toward my old room. The door remained slightly open, exactly the way I used to leave it. Inside, dust covered everything: my old dresser, the broken baseball glove. Even faded superhero stickers still clung to the closet door. I smiled despite myself. Then, I noticed something impossible. The bed had no dust. Someone had recently sat there. The blanket showed clear wrinkles. I touched it, still warm. I froze. Someone had been here. Only moments ago. A loud bang echoed downstairs. I spun around. The front door. Had someone just entered? I hurried into the hallway. Who's there? No answer, only silence. I rushed downstairs. The front door remained closed, locked, exactly as I had left it. No one stood inside. No one stood outside. I checked every room again. Nothing. As I returned toward the staircase, I noticed something that made my heart sink. Fresh, muddy footprints. They hadn't been there before. They now led upstairs. I slowly followed them again. This time, they didn't stop at my bedroom. They continued farther, toward the attic ladder. The wooden ladder hung open. I stared upward. Darkness, complete darkness. I aimed my flashlight into the opening. Old boxes, wooden beams, nothing else. Then, something softly rolled across the attic floor, a glass marble. It stopped at the edge of the opening. I recognized it instantly. Blue with a white swirl inside, my favorite marble. I had lost it when I was 9 years old. It had disappeared inside the attic. I never found it again until now. Someone had just rolled it back to me. My breathing became uneven. Who's up there? For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, I heard it. A chair scraping slowly across the wooden attic floor. Not loud, not fast, just enough to let me know someone had heard my question, and they were still up there. The chair stopped moving. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound itself. I kept my flashlight pointed into the attic. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. The beam only illuminated old rafters, dust, and stacks of forgotten boxes. I told myself there had to be an explanation. A raccoon, a loose board, an animal, anything but another person. I climbed the ladder anyway. Every step groaned beneath my weight. The attic felt colder than the rest of the house, not freezing, just empty, the kind of cold you feel in buildings that haven't heard another human voice in years. My flashlight swept across the room. Old furniture, broken picture frames, a rocking horse, my father's toolbox. Then, I found something that shouldn't have been there, a sleeping bag, modern. Clean, next to it sat bottled water, several canned meals, a camping lantern. Whoever had been living here was still living here. They hadn't left. I reached for my phone, still no signal. I quietly backed toward the ladder. Then, I heard footsteps not above me. Below, someone was climbing the attic ladder. Slowly, one step, then another. The wood creaked beneath their weight. I switched off my flashlight. The attic disappeared into darkness. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped, only a few feet below the opening. Neither of us moved. Almost a full minute passed. Then, the ladder began folding upward by itself. Someone below was pulling it closed. I lunged forward, grabbing the edge just before it sealed shut. The ladder slammed back down. I rushed into the hallway. Nobody. Every bedroom door stood open. The hallway was empty. I searched every room. Nothing, not a single person, but the front door downstairs was now wide open. Cold wind rushed through the house. I ran outside. The yard stretched empty beneath the grey afternoon sky. No vehicle, no footprints leading away. Only endless fields moving with the wind. Whoever had been inside had vanished. I decided to leave. This was no longer about memories. Someone had broken into the property. I got into my truck, turned the key, nothing. The battery was dead. Impossible. It had started perfectly 20 minutes earlier. I tried again, click, click, nothing. The sun slowly disappeared behind heavy clouds. Darkness arrived much sooner than I expected. I was stranded. The nearest house was over 4 miles away. Walking would take nearly an hour. I grabbed my backpack, locked the truck, started walking down Willow Creek Road. After 15 minutes, I looked back. The farmhouse still stood in the distance, exactly where it should, but someone stood on the porch, watching me, too far away to recognize, completely still. I kept walking. Another 10 minutes passed. I looked back again. The figure hadn't moved, still standing there, hands at their sides, facing me. I finally reached the old Miller farm. The house was occupied. An elderly woman answered the door. She looked surprised. "Can I help you?" I explained everything. The dead truck, the footprints, someone inside the farmhouse. Her expression slowly changed. "You went back there?" I nodded. She hesitated, then quietly asked, "Did you go into the attic?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes." She looked down at the floor. I hoped nobody ever would. She invited me inside over hot coffee. She told me something I had never heard before. The day my father supposedly died, the ambulance never took him from the farmhouse. It arrived, stayed less than 10 minutes, then left. No sirens, no urgency. The funeral happened 3 days later. Closed casket. No one in town ever saw his body. People asked questions my mother refused to answer. Eventually, everyone stopped talking about it. I stared at her. "Why are you telling me this now?" She looked toward the window. "Because every few months, someone sees a light in that attic." I felt sick. She continued. "Sometimes hunters, sometimes teenagers, sometimes delivery drivers. They all say the same thing. They see someone standing in the attic window. And every one of them says, it looks like they're waiting." The sheriff arrived an hour later. 2 deputies followed me back to the farmhouse. By then, night had fallen. The house looked even older beneath the moonlight. We searched every room. The attic, the barn, the basement, no one, but they found the sleeping bag, the food, the lantern. Someone had definitely been living there. One deputy noticed something unusual. Fresh photographs, dozens of them, hidden beneath the sleeping bag. Every photograph showed the farmhouse, taken over many years. Winter, summer. Rain, snow, always the same angle, as if someone had been documenting the house. Then I noticed something else. The newest photograph had been taken that morning. It showed my truck parked outside, me, standing at the front door. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was unlocking the house. Someone had been watching me before I even went inside. The sheriff searched the surrounding woods for 2 days. Nothing, no campsites, no trails, no missing persons, no suspect. The investigation ended. The farmhouse was demolished the following week. I watched from across the road. The excavator tore through the roof first, then the walls. Finally, the attic collapsed. Workers suddenly stopped. One of them called the foreman. They had discovered a hidden room behind the attic wall. It wasn't on the original building plans. Inside, they found a wooden chair, a battery-powered lantern, old blankets, hundreds of canned food containers, and 1 notebook. The first pages listed dates, names, vehicle license plates, descriptions of everyone who had ever visited the property. The entries stretched back nearly 16 years. The final page contained only 1 sentence: "Daniel finally came home." There was no signature, no fingerprints, nothing that identified who had written it. Months later, I tried moving on. I sold everything connected to the property. I convinced myself whoever had lived there was simply a disturbed squatter. That explanation made sense until one evening. I received a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me sleeping in my apartment. The photograph had been taken through my bedroom window. On the back, someone had written 5 words: "Home is wherever you are." I never contacted the police because I already knew what they would say. No fingerprints, no evidence, no suspect. I moved again, changed jobs, changed cities, changed my phone number. None of it mattered. Every October, without fail, an unmarked envelope appears in my mailbox, always containing 1 new photograph, always taken without my knowledge, always showing me somewhere I thought I was alone. The farmhouse is gone, the attic is gone. Whoever lived there never came with the house. They came with me. If you are brave enough to hear more nightmares, subscribe to Tales of the Dark. And if you have your own terrifying experience, leave it in the comments or send your story by email. Maybe your nightmare will become the next story told here.